Hi, my name is Rafaela, and today I will do my long-awaited second review of Legend of Zang Hai. After my first review, I still had so much I wanted to share with you because there was so many good things about this series. So finally, I'm here to do my second one. 大家好，我是瑞菲拉。我知道我的上一个视频有很多中国人观看。谢谢你们的评论，我会继续说英语，因为我的中文不好。But thank you for watching, and I will put subtitles so you can still understand. Now, without further introductions, for this video I would first like to start with some reviews of the acting work once again, then some reviews about the actors that really stood out to me, and lastly I want to finish with some Easter eggs, which thanks to a lovely viewer of my previous video I got this idea. There are a lot of aspects of the Ming Dynasty that are put into this series, a lot of art, a lot of the culture, and some of those Easter eggs I have found and I want to share them with you. I hope this will also still be entertaining for the Chinese fans. Of course, it being your culture, you know way more than I do, but there are just some minor details about some things they use in the series that I hope you will not have figured out yet. So see the whole video to find out these little Easter eggs. And now, without any further ado, let's do further. So the first thing I want to review with you is a snippet of episode 12 and a snippet of episode 19. In both episodes, the writer used a technique that is a really nice way of storytelling, but also brings out the skill of the actors. So come with me first to episode 19 and afterwards episode 12.
还好今日遇见了我，不然你就出大事儿。怎么搞得这么狼狈啊？快吃吧，吃完我送你回去。如果我说我不会军营了，人与人之间是不是根本不存在无条件的好？这世上的人都有自己的追求和目的，很少会有人不计回报的付出。那你呢？如果我不是侯府的公子，你会接近我吗？如果我跟我爹并无仇恨，永远不会背叛他，你会跟我结盟吗？如果我到最后都没有办法得知当年的秘密，你还会帮助我吗？
Now let's go to episode 12.
将相思不足惜，但现在我爹竟也成为了我的仇人。沧海，我爹是你的仇人，你要杀了他，为你全家报仇。可你为何要帮我？我有一件事，需要从平津侯的嘴里探出来。这件事对我来说很重要，但是你不能问，你需要有人帮你从他口中问出来。对，我家当年的灭门惨案，凶手除了你爹，还有另外2个人，一个是掌印太监曹敬贤，而另一个人，我到现在都还没有任何线索。我需要找到这个人，在此之前，我不会打草惊蛇。你要我从我爹口中打听出这个人的身份，这是你帮我的条件。是。打听出来之后呢？你会做什么？
guess you know which technique I mean. It's silence. Of course, the actors build in a whole bunch of pauses in both episodes before they speak, but in between, there are still pauses or pieces where they don't answer at all, and that is so much more telling sometimes of a story than words could do, because actually the audience does want to work with the story. They don't want to be passive listeners, but they want to be actively involved too and think for themselves and try to think or imagine what the characters are feeling and going through and thinking. And silence, just building in silence here and there, does help with that. Because, well, literally, you're not saying anything. And it's just the audience that can stick onto the character, whatever they need or want to stick on the character at that moment. Like in episode 19, was Zang Hai, like, really, did he really not want to be friends with him, or was he afraid of saying it because that would make him too fragile and would make everything he's busy with, I mean trying to get revenge, make that too real to him, and that's why he did not answer? Does he want to be friends with him? Does he not want to be friends with him? Like, it gets you, the audience, involved in thinking what's going on. I think it also leaves way more room for the actors to play and for the actors to show how good they are. Because to be in silence yet still behave and interact and respond to one another as being your character whilst nothing is being said, that is harder to do. So often I've seen actors only act and behave as the character when they say something and not when they're in silence. Very good actors like these ones, they stay within a role not only when responding but also of course within the silence. It's constantly that they are living the character and not acting the character. Once again, I think it's a wonderful way of storytelling because the audience does want to think, and the silence leaves way more room for us to think whatever we want to think, and leaves way more room for speculation. To leave that room also means that there's way more we are allowed to feel and think than you could ever put to words. Because let's be honest, our own inner worlds are way bigger than any language could ever explain. So it also allows for that to happen. And I think that's wonderful. I love that. I love that for this writer too, that they did that. Yay! And now let's head on to the next episode, which will be episode 26. So there are a few scenes of episode 26 that I want to share with you. For the first bit, I'm not going to say anything, and we're just going to watch it together, because I don't think it needs an introduction.
今夜，我父亲把我叫到书房。 将所有事情都告诉我了。面对他的时候，我忽然发现他鬓间白发添了许多。他早已交还兵权，现在也失去了官位，再也不是当年那位威风凛凛的平津侯了。我甚至觉得，他站在我面前都矮了几分。藏海，那日在火场上，我爹把你救出来。 其实我十分嫉妒，然而连他自己都不知道，你是一个要手刃他的人。你的目的已经达到了，我父亲已经败了，他的心血付诸东流，他已是个迟暮的老人，你就不能放过他吗？
你心疼你的父亲，你害怕他死在仇人手里。 那你就更应该理解我了。
我已经履行了约定，将一切都告诉了你。你可以找另外2个仇人复仇，但你不能杀我爹。
庄二公子，多谢了。
Yeah, I think in this piece, the actor Xiao Zhan has really mastered the act of stillness. Very often it does way more than moving around or being all over the place. The stillness in his play really brings more intensity to it and really draws people in. And between these two actors, what then happens is a tension that you can cut with a knife. It's ah! And on top of that, what this restraint does is it makes the characters be pushed by their emotions and not be guided by it. Because what a lot of people don't understand that are outside of the industry or outside of the craft is that for an actor, the emotions aren't the goal at all. They're just a byproduct of the situation the character is in, and the goal, the literal goal the character has, what they want to achieve in this scene. And those two combined, they create the emotions that then become the fuel to fuel their actions again. So the emotions themselves are not the goal, and it makes the whole play way more intense and way more believable if people keep those emotions inside. So not showing them directly, but keeping them like in their eyes and in their body, and those emotions being the driving force behind their action. So for example, anger being just that little push in your back that is pushing you forward with fire, or agony being another driving force to put out your actions. And that's so beautifully seen in this scene, because none of these actors completely show their emotions, but behind their eyes, you know, there's so much going on, and what they're feeling is driving them to do and say the things they want to do and they want to say. And also those emotions, because they don't let them explode, you just know they're still going to be there in the next scene and the next scene and the next episode, still driving them forward into the actions that they have to take and need to take. And that's what I find so awesome about this whole scene, and it gives me goosebumps. Yeah, it's beautifully done. For now I want to go to a next bit of the same episode, episode 26, because this episode is really well done on multiple levels. So come with me to the next bit of this episode.
冬夏女王，接下来我会一个一个了结你们。好儿子，庄志行，你真是我的好儿子。快躲呀，快躲！你要是看到自己儿子现在的样子，你是该笑还是该哭啊？啊！
Sorry, I'm so focused on Xiao Jun in his acting that everything just gets to me. Yeah, but what I wanted to start with was, as soon as he said the Queen of Dongsha, we can see in his face, the face of the Marquis, that something falls into place. He probably then understands who his son was asking for, who the third enemy was. And then also probably pops into his head like, oh, well, one, he betrayed me, but on the other hand, I did something good in, of course, not telling the truth. Spoiler alert, again. Beautiful parallel here is the parallel you have with the scene in the Dragonstone, where you have Zang Hai, who is in front of the Dragonstone and starts to laugh because he's like pushed against a wall. He has nowhere to go anymore, and he sort of laughs out of the cruelty and almost the craziness and the anger and pain he feels with being so betrayed. And the same thing here happens with the Marquis. I mean, he is literally caged in, he cannot go anywhere, and he knows it. So the utter sheer betrayal sort of pushes him over this edge of, for the split second, going nuts. Just exactly the parallel with Zang Hai in the Dragonstone. So I love this parallel that I put that in there. Next bit of this episode I want to show you goes into this, or is a extension of this. It's the last thing that the Marquis said to Zang Hai about his father, either way being proud or crying about what had happened to Zang Hai and who he has become. And what I just said at the beginning, once I stopped the episode, that I'm so focused on Xiao Zhan, so everything he portrays just gets to me. His stillness there again, which he really has mastered in this series. You can sort of feel the shame, or I have a feeling that he's sort of feeling ashamed and can feel the pain. In this next bit, you can see more of that. This whole scene in the snow, it's so beautifully done, and it's so beautifully done how Xiao Zhan keeps all of his emotions inside, or all of the emotions of the character inside. How we can see for a tiny fraction of a second into his internal world, and then he has to swallow all of it again, just like he had to do his entire life. And this last bit, certainly after what the Marquis has said to him, it leaves room for the audience to see that there are two sides to this coin. On one hand, he's probably relieved that finally his enemy is gonna die and truly drive into a corner, but on the other hand, we can see that Zang Hai doesn't have a heart of stone, but that he still feels the weight of the terrible things he's doing to people, and that maybe if he would have had a different life, he would never have wanted to kill people. This scene doesn't force feed this side of Zang Hai to people, because what I see, if I'm honest, a lot of times in a lot of series and movies nowadays, in at least the Western media, is that they're force feeding their audience. They're with either way words or too explicitly showing people what is going on and what you should think is going on in the internal world of a character. And one, that makes me feel as if they think the audience is stupid, which the audience is not. And two, I think it's not as powerful as letting the audience decide for themselves whatever they think the character is going through, because that then involves the own internal world of the audience too. It becomes a exchange between what is being shown on the screen and what is going on inside the internal world of the person watching, and that is way more powerful than just force feeding everything. And the directors of this series have understood that, and I love that. Because whatever I just said, it's my interpretation of what I think is going on, what would make it very heavy for me. But then someone else watching could have another interpretation, and that could be the right interpretation for them to feel certain feelings. It's more or less what they're doing is just taking the audience by the hand and just showing them, this is what's happening, this is the character, this is probably what is going on in their internal world, but you can only see this outside, so you go with whatever you think, instead of going like, you see this, you need to think this, you need to think it, you need to... And I'm getting tired of seeing that in a whole bunch of movies nowadays, so thank you to the directors. This was an amazing episode, episode 26. Oh, just the whole thing, everything in this episode, like, oh, it was good. But let's go on to another episode, and this one is 38. So for the next episode, episode 38, let's just dive straight into it. Just be very mindful of the connection between two people here.
娘，娘，
智奴，哥哥，你是智奴？你真的是智奴？好孩子，别哭。可是，你怎么会在这儿？你怎么会在这儿？
娘，我好想你们。
哥哥，你都长这么高了，岳奴都认不出你了。
What I think is really beautifully done in this episode is the connection between the two actors, like Zang Hai and his mother. These two actors, even though they've been on set only for a very short time together, the both of them have created this atmosphere and this truthfulness to it that the first time watching it, I almost believed that this was actually his mother. I mean, of course I know it wasn't, but the way they played it, it was so truthful and so real that it did feel that way. The way he was calling his mother and the affection and longing in his eyes, it was so well done. I re-watched it a couple of times to just sort of try and see the lie in his eyes, to try and see something that would tell me like, nah, it's not his mother. And I just couldn't find it. It was so well done. I think certainly for the connection between parents and children, it's actually harder to act because there's such a closeness and familiarity between family and children, which is really hard to fake. Credit to both of them, because of course one can only act as good as long as the other one is also giving them something to work with. So the both of them worked beautifully in this scene. Yeah, wonderful. And then we skip on to a further bit inside the same episode. I know, there are just, like, every episode is good, but there are a few in between that just keep on giving and keep on giving and keep on giving. So let's hop on to the next bit of this episode.
师傅，你不和我们一起？
我可去不了，我得留在赵大人身边，帮你们盯着他的动静。小海在鬼门关上走这么一遭，我现在还后怕呢。小海，还记得你离开星斗府的那天吗？
师傅不辞而别的那天。
其实，我和你星斗师傅吵了一架，他一直觉得智奴不应该是藏海，要忘记仇恨，才能开始新的人生。而我却认为，只有你解决了仇恨，才能真正放下，找到属于自己的未来。
放心吧，我已经不是10年前的那个智奴了。
10年相伴，今日再送你一程。记住， 该做的事情要做，但更要好好的活着。
我们的路还有很远，你要多加小心。
What is so good about this snippet is he is sick, and you can clearly see that he's sick, but he's not overplaying it. You know, it's just there, and on top of that, there are other things to do. There are still things he wants to figure out with his master, some things to discuss, that he needs to pay attention to and has to be curious about, and that is of course overtaking the sickness, as it would do with normal people. In real life, when you're sick, you're also like, you know you're sick, you can feel you're sick, so you already automatically behave in a slightly different way. But when there are things to do, that whole feeling of sickness sort of gets parked into a spot. It's still there, you know it, you behave like it, but you're not overacting it, you're not playing into it. Even when you're sick, it's still, there's something I need to do, so whatever I'm feeling inside just has to be pushed to the side for a second, and I'm gonna focus on this now. How crappy I might feel, this is important right now, and he's doing that so beautifully. Another bit I want to show you, a tiny, very tiny snippet of episode 39. And let's hop onto that. I want you to mind how he is behaving when he is scared.
那些是什么？
藏海，这些难道就是？ 小心！
很多，你来看。
这是东夏的战俘。
没错，他们是东夏的氏族。
他们怎么会在这儿？难道死前？ 经历了什么？
或许真相就在那里。
So in this piece, it's the tiniest thing he does that makes all the difference, and it's not looking at each other that often. When people are truly scared and afraid of their life, they will not look away from the danger or the threat. That they tend to look at the one that's next to them. That doesn't happen in real life, because you've already marked the one next to you as being safe. So you won't look at them, except for when you truly need to communicate something or to look what's going through their heads. Other than that, you hardly will ever look at the one next to you, because you've already marked them as safe. So you will always keep your eyes on the thing that's making you scared, on the thing that's a threat to your life, and only for a split second you will go like, what's going on with you? Okay, nothing great. Or what shall we do? Plan A or plan B? And a lot of people forget that. And I still have a lot to learn with acting, but I just have a whole bunch of at first life experiences that I can work with, and thanks to which I know this is a natural way of acting when you're truly scared for your life. You won't lose sight of the thing that's actually being a threat to you. Yeah, another acting lesson with Rafaela. So next I want to go with you guys to episode 37. So come watch.
家道中落。自那之后，我们三人便被那些氏族子弟彻底孤立，也经常遭到欺负。我们尝试过反抗。 可连夫子也向着他们。那时我明白了，世上有一种东西叫权势。
I want to talk about what this older gentleman does, and I'm so sorry. I would try to look up on the internet what his actual name is of the actor, but I could not find it. At least not on Google. So sorry for that. But the older gentleman. What he does here is when he's telling the story about what happened in his youth, The second we turn back to nowadays and we see his face, you can really see him being completely caught up in his memories about the past. That's exactly what actors should also do. As you're telling a story that happened in the past or telling a story in general, you should always keep the images of that story in mind. The older gentleman, he did it very beautifully, and I've already seen, as you could see in my last episode, which I did, that this gentleman is also a really good and subtle actor, because there was this bit about listening that I put into my earlier episode, and the moment the listening really stood out to me was actually also when Xiao Zhan was acting with this older actor. And also, by the way, the children are pretty good and solid already. Now let's hop back to episode 38. Once again, I told you we're hopping across episodes. So let's go back to episode 38, where there's something else I want to talk to you about. And that is the last bit for the actual acting bit I wanted to share with you.
小海，师傅喝了赵大人的茶，活不成了。我骗了你10年，一直欠你一声对不起。我羡慕六初，他不知道赵大人就是你的仇人，不必忍受内心的煎熬。我也羡慕星斗，比我先走一步，因为他看得更明白。 知道早晚有这么一天，但我陪你的时间更长，他会更羡慕我吧。
Okay, what I wanted to share with you was this bit with the window in a carriage. He is so in his role. Once again, he has the character Zang Hai so ingrained within him that what I saw something from behind the scenes. He was opening that window like a million times before they finally got a right shot. And at some point you even hear the director joking about the fact that right now it looks pretty funny what he's doing. But he's never sniffing out of his role. Even when they're joking behind the scenes, he's still in his role, in that pain, and seeing what the character would see in this scene. I mean, obviously, when they're filming, he's not seeing the other actor walking away. He has to imagine it all. But the fact that he is so in his role, and you could see that beautifully behind the scenes, that even when other people are joking about around him, he's still hyper-focused on whatever is going on in Zang Hai and not in Xiao Zhan. And that actually brings me to our next topic. As a lot of Westerners might not realize is that the Chinese acting industry is big. Like, it's very big, it's very competitive, and a lot of these stars which are starring in these series, they're probably crazy expensive. So even so is probably Xiao Zhan. But the credits I want to give to these actors is that they're always on set. They're always acting in scenes together with their scene partners and never leaving their scene partners to talk to a tennis ball. So shout out to the actors and also like the big actors like Xiao Zhan for still showing up and being there for the whole creative process and to figure that out together with the co-actors on set. That brings me also to another thing which I really enjoyed watching. I once seen this interview and I think they had translated a bit like he was almost making like something like PowerPoint presentations to keep track of everything that had happened before every scene, so he knows exactly with what kind of attitude, with what kind of feeling and energy he must show up for the next scene. Because of course when we're filming, The scenes are all messed up, so you never do it in a chronological order, so you must know very well what you're doing. And it's nice that he also shares some of his methods on how he's doing this, so other actors can learn. I find it so cool that he's not afraid to show his creative process and not afraid to show how he sort of builds up a role and puts little bits and pieces together in order to form the role, and also how much effort he actually puts into the roles. Some people make it look like very effortless, but it's nice to have someone in the industry that's like, nah, I put work in this, I put work in this. That I think encourages people, or at least it encourages me, because nothing ever really comes easy in life, nor does it. So to have someone admit that who's at the top, that's just nice. That brings me to something I'd forgotten to say before when we were still talking about acting. So I will say it now and put up some videos of it too, somewhere along here. And that is that you could see his whole energy change so beautifully from the beginning of the series to the end. You can see it's almost as if he had more energy when he was not yet in the capital, when he was still doing his thing outside of the capital and learning. He, like, his eyes were wide open, he had more energy, there was a spring in his step, there was no tension in his face. And during the series you can see there's more tension being built up. His energy from lively becomes very, like, drawn back. His eyes become less wide open, there's less of a sparkle in them, they become more and more dull and smaller almost. There's more tension in his forehead, there's more tension in his mouth and his jaw. It's so wonderful, and so once again the meticulous work really paid off here, because you can see a whole shift from almost an innocent Zang Hai to a Zang Hai that's filled with distrust towards everything that's happening in the capital. And I also want to give a big shout out to Xiaojian's fan group, because you guys are cute. I got so many DMs and comments and everything about him and how much you wanted to share his story with me and his behind the scenes footage with me, and some things, some interviews. It was just too sweet how much you wanted to share, and this mid bit is because of you guys, because you wanted to have more of my opinions on his acting and more of my opinions also on himself. So here you go. And also a couple of you notified me about the fact that something that was in my previous episode about him throwing up when the emotions became too much. And you guys told me that he actually went through some adverse life events himself, and he used what he felt back then to fuel his acting. I'm really happy that you guys have told me that, because that inspires me, because this is also one of the reasons why I started acting. I wanted to start acting because I want to use all of my adverse life events and things that have happened to me and everything I know I want to use it for something good, and so other people could maybe benefit from it or maybe find themselves in it. So that's one of my reasons why I started acting, and it's so nice to see that someone else, like a big actor like him, is doing the same thing. So that gives me inspiration again. In line with that, it's so amazing how he was open about this, how he opened up about using his own life experiences and using what he felt to use it in his acting. Because I think also what a lot of people don't understand is that acting isn't always like fun and games. It also at times will cost you as an actor when you have to go into these feelings that you once had, because it is what the character asks of you. You really have to relive some of those things, or at least relive the emotions. It's stuck onto a different life, but still you have to dig into yourself in order to bring those experiences out again. And it also costs you in a sense of you have to guts to open up this much and to be this vulnerable, even on a film set, because, like, don't forget there are at least 30 people surrounding an actor when you're on a set, and you just have to be there and go through a breakdown and be willing to have 30 people see your honest, heartfelt breakdown. You have to have the guts to do that. And then lastly, the bit about how much I, at least, can sort of see and understand from Xiaojian is that he truly does inspire me, because I think, and I don't say this lightly, I don't say this lightly, because I am not the type of person that can ever fangirl about anyone. I've lived my life without having anyone to look up to, without having any kind of idol, or it's really hard for me to, I don't know, be inspired by something else than life itself. And I think this is the first time that actually happened. And why? I think it's because this man is not afraid to show how much he's growing, and to show on one hand how maybe in some hands imperfect and just normal he is, and how much he's still growing in his acting skills, because I think they have grown so much, and you can see that in this series. But also him as a person, from like maybe even just 2019 till now, he's already gone through 3 big changes, and you can feel it so much in his energy. And that is, to me, is very inspiring, because I'm someone that is also constantly changing, and sometimes I feel a bit awkward or bad about that. But it's a natural way of being, and sort of seeing someone in an industry where I think it's more expected of you to sort of stay the same, and that someone is still changing so much and growing so much himself and not afraid to show that growth. And not in a literal way with words, but just you can see it in his energy and in his face. He's changing so much. That's really inspiring me to not be afraid to show the same. And I think also this guy has a really special energy. I am a bit sensitive to seeing those energies. The way it comes across to me, like the color of it, is white. And that's not something a lot of people have. I think that's also one of the things that really draws people to him, because he has a very unique, special, but clean and down-to-earth energy around him, which just draws people in. Doesn't matter what he looks like, he could have half the face he has and still draw people in because of the energy he exudes. And talking about growth and getting further in your career and getting further in your craft, I also knew there was more for me to explore than I could find in the Netherlands. I have some awesome news to share with you guys. I applied for one of the biggest and most prestigious acting schools in the world this spring. I applied for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. Guess who actually made it in? Yeah, I got selected to study and further my career at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and I am thrilled. But there is just one thing that's standing in my way, and that's unfortunately money. It's because studying in America, and certainly at one of these big schools, is crazy expensive. So my shout out to you, if you like my content, or if you believe in my talent enough, or if you just feel extra charitable today, then please donate on anywhere where I put this on the screen. It's a link to my fundraiser. Everyone who donates does get a little creative gift from me too. And please do donate, even if it's the smallest amount of money. It would help me enormously. And please also share this link with everyone you know, like your family, your friends, your neighborhood, your neighbor's dog, that cat that's always roaming around your house and you still don't know who the owner is. Share it with everyone. You would help me enormously to follow my dreams and follow my art, to help me in getting better at my profession, better at my art, so I can also make better and more beautiful movies and theaters for you guys. And now, without any further ado, let's get to the last bit of this series, and that is the Easter eggs that I found. So the series is situated during the Ming Dynasty. It is played out in a non-real country, so whole Yong and Dongsha doesn't exist. But the whole time period is typically Ming Dynasty. You can see that from both the way that the state is run, but also from the costumes they wear and the customs they have. They really tried to keep everything as close to and as authentically to the Ming Dynasty as possible. So everything you see was actually being used in the Ming Dynasty. There are also a bunch of idioms in the series which are also all Ming Dynasty idioms. So they really made sure that none of the language that they used was used after the Ming Dynasty. And the first thing I want to go into with you is the tortoise shell pipa. So this pipa that's only shown for a couple of seconds in the series is actually a pipa that does exist. It's a replica of one that was made in the Ming Dynasty. And I found it back on the site of the Met in New York. And what is special about it is that normally pipas are made with wood, and the only thing that's made out of a tortoise shell are the little nails they put on their fingers to play the instrument. But never a whole pipa is made out of a tortoise shell. But they actually took the effort to look up the instruments that were made in the Ming Dynasty and to make a full replica of this one. And you can look it up on the website of the Met, and it's a very good replica. So that's the first little Easter egg that's in there. So the next Easter egg I found of Chinese culture in this series is the art of voice mimicry, or as they call it in Chinese, Ji. This is an art form that's already thousands of years old, and it received imperial patronage during the Song Dynasty. So it's a really, really old form of art. And what these artists were able to do was they were able to mimic perfectly any type of animal, ranging from birds to tigers and so on, but also some of them natural things like water, and a bunch of them could also mimic different voices. So what you see with these shadow plays is that one person would very often mimic all of the sounds in just one play and all of the different voices and characters. And it's really awesome that they put that in there too, because it's such an old form of art, and apparently back in the day people were so proficient in it that it was really hard for people to even distinguish whether or not it was an actual animal speaking or an actual animal sound, or if it was the mastery of this voice mimicry. Now, the third Easter egg that I found, I was really happy when I finally found it. And it's about the big lantern screen that you have in the tower. The whole painting that is on there is a painting that was actually painted by a painter during the Ming Dynasty, and this painter was very famous for his specific use of a certain technique in ancient China, and his name was Ying. And this whole painting was actually inspired by a story of a writer that lived way before this painter. His name is Tiao Yuanming, and his story is called Peach Blossom Spring. This whole story was made during the 100 Kingdom period, so when there was big war in China, and there were actually a whole bunch of kingdoms constantly at war and constantly fighting with one another. So it was a very rough time to live in China during those days. And what this writer put into his story was actually a self-sufficient community he found when he got lost and carried away by a stream. He ended up in this community, and they were completely self-sufficient and peaceful, and really had found a way to live outside of the whole chaos that was happening outside in China. So it was a very idyllic utopia he had put into his story, and it is such a beautiful little Easter egg. We see this painting a couple of times, but you really must look into it before you find the painter, find that he is from the Ming Dynasty, and then find that his whole painting is based upon this story. And this story is so fitting for Antu, because of course she's also in a country that's at war with her country. She is in a capital that's not her own and probably feels very hostile. But then she becomes a self-sufficient woman and creates her own little utopia in her tower. And Oh, it's so beautifully done, and such a tiny little detail they put in there where there's so much more behind it, and even more beautiful, as you can see here on the screen. What is the painting surrounded by? Yeah, a whole bunch of water, and she has to go, and everyone has to go across the bridge in order to reach the painting. So they have to cross the water, which also happens to the person in the story. They get carried away by the river, by the water, to this idyllic place, and so does she. And it even takes a center stage in her tower, maybe to even remind her of her own idyllic place. It's awesome! Also, when you see the whole lantern thing, that's another cultural heritage of China. It's specific of one of the provinces in China. And this form of art with the lanterns and the way they make the lanterns, it's called Qing Huai Deng. I'm trying, guys, I'm trying. And actually, the lantern festivals that are attached to these sort of lanterns, they became especially popular in the Ming Dynasty because of one of the emperors. So once again, something that's connected to the Ming Dynasty, something that's a cultural heritage of China, and with a nice story behind it that I put into this series. Attention of detail, guys, it's awesome. Then there's another part of the Ming Dynasty culture that they nicely put into this series, and which is nice for foreigners to know, is very often someone's profession or someone's status could be shown by the way they dress, the kind of clothes they have, ranging from more sober and less vibrant colors to clothing that's way more flamboyant and has way more colors. But also someone's hairstyle and the hats they had on are very telling of what kind of profession they had. And even if they were of age or not, both for men and women during their different ages, they had different hairstyles. I believe when both girls and boys are younger, they have a specific hairstyle with two knots on the side of their head, and for the boys it was one in front, one in the back. Then as they grow up, for girls the hairstyle becomes different, and then for boys they get this top knot, but it's still allowed to be a bit chubby and not as well put together, which you see at the beginning of the series, where Zang Hai has some hairs falling out and his hair not being as tightly put together. And later in the series, indeed, his hair becomes very tightly bound together in one big top knot and nothing is allowed to fall out, which normally also shows that someone is of age. And then also with the hats, what you very nicely see is when Zang Hai is a scholar, he has a specific hat on, which is, for the Ming Dynasty, a specific hat that is made for the scholars. So when someone would wear that, you would automatically know they're a scholar. And then later in this series, he wears a whole bunch of other stuff in his bun. It becomes more flamboyant, like there's more jade in his hair. Of course, very telling to the people that he is of a higher status now. You can also see it with the Marquis and his whole household and everyone that has a higher status. They have way more jewellery around their top knot than other people have. I mean, at the beginning of the series, Zang Hai only had a little ribbon around his hair that also looked a bit shabby. It became better and better and better. Way at the end of the series, he is wearing this hat specifically for the ministers in the Ming Dynasty, and this one is not only used in the Ming Dynasty for the ministers but also in other dynasties. Funny story about this one, in one of the more earlier dynasties there was a emperor who apparently had enough of the gossip in his court, so he made these hats too, but then with extremely long side pieces, so they look almost like propellers. And he made that so that his ministers would not be gossiping when a meeting was going on in court. So yeah, the hairstyles also very, very telling and very truthful to that day and age in the Ming Dynasty. There's only one thing I'm wondering about, and that is with the Marquis's son. At the beginning of the series, he has loose hair and only a top knot or even a ponytail, which is not authentic as far as I know. In ancient China, people would never, ever, ever, ever wear their hair loose because it was seen as less civil. So I'm really curious why they made the choice to give him this inauthentic hairstyle at the beginning. I can understand that's a way of showing that he was very immature at the beginning and maybe even a bit uncivil in that way, or less refined. And then later on he learns to behave and be more refined, and then it goes into a top knot. But I just wonder why they chose to go for completely loose hair instead of just having the top knot be completely disheveled. That's just one thing I want to throw in there, and that's one thing I found that was not authentic as far as I know. Then this series also put a whole bunch of feng shui in here, which is really nice, but it's way too much to explain because that's just a whole philosophy that can go on and on and on. And I'm, one, not proficient in it, I don't know enough about it, but the other thing is you could go on speaking forever. So my Chinese audience probably already knows a whole bunch about feng shui, and for my other international audience, I'm sorry, bits and pieces you're going to have to look up yourself, but I can share a few things with you. They had these protectors of the different directions, which was for north the black tortoise, for the west it was the white tiger, for the south it was the phoenix, and for the east it was the blue dragon. You also see this back when Zang Hai is busy with this special box thingy. And everything he says here about these directions are also directly derived from ancient cultures in China or feng shui directly. Then you have something which is called, the 9-star layout. That is a feng shui thing about how to decorate your home, what to put where, what kind of auspicious things to put where. It is very extensive and a very extensive knowledge, so if you want to know more about that, you can actually look up the 9-star layout and figure it out for yourself. And speaking of hairstyles and everything, I absolutely loved all of the hairstyles they put in there, from the hair ribbons, yes, hair ribbons, to all of the jades they put in the hair and the other jewellery and everything. I really loved what it did and how truthful they also stayed to the Ming Dynasty. And speaking of the costume department in general, I think they did a great job because all of the costumes, they look really nice. They feel authentic, and just look at it. It is so elegant. At least I think the clothing of the Ming Dynasty is really, really elegant. Then I actually have two questions for my lovely Chinese audience, which is one about the tea drinking thing. I thought you were never allowed to drink out of a teapot ever, and now he's doing it, and it seems like a very gangster thing to do, but I'm also very confused because I thought you were never ever allowed to do this. Am I wrong in thinking that, or is he really just not doing anything according to the rules? And the second thing I wanted to ask, which I was not able to find on my own, is the sleeves. Because I've seen this in multiple ancient dramas where they just take everything out their sleeves. Like a present, a rose, a full tea set with a boiling kettle. You need a doctor? No problem, here comes the doctor. Like, how much does fit in those sleeves? And are there like pockets in those sleeves, or how did they hold anything in there? Is that an actual authentic ancient thing that they did in the past, where they were able to put a whole bunch into their sleeves and use them half and half as their bags, or is it just a drama series thing? And for my very, very last Easter egg, it's this. I swear, in every series I've watched so far where he plays, he does this thing with his mouth. The mouth thing. Also, if you want to know a bit more about the Chinese culture and specifically the Ming Dynasty, you want to immerse yourself into the way they probably used to live back then without having to look up a whole bunch yourself, then watch this series, because it does give you a chance to immerse yourself within the ancient culture of the Ming Dynasty. So that was it for me for this review. It was longer than a previous one, but I still hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments, and also let me know in the comments which other series you would like me to review next time. I already have a few lined up which I thought were really good and I would like to review them with you. But please let me know which you would want me to review. So that's it for me, and see you next time. Bye bye!